Hello and welcome to another episode of IAmMaxwellHearMeRoar. This week we're talking about genres. What is the point of genres? Well, that's not really the point of this video, so I'm just going to tell you. Well, it's really just an organization system, so you can generally parse what you will or will not like without having to try absolutely every entry in any given medium that you enjoy. So it's pretty important that these labels are accurate and useful. Unfortunately, in games, we regularly define genres in a pretty superficial way. Think about the turn-based RPG, the first-person shooter, even the puzzle platformer. All of these games are, at least partially, defined by mechanics in the game. Why is this a problem, you may ask? Don't people play games for the mechanics? To that, I say, sorta. Now I draw your attention to a paper from 2006 that attempted to define some things about game design with something that they called the MDA system. MDA stands for Mechanics, Dynamics, Aesthetics, and is ordered in the sequence of how a game is designed. First, you create some mechanics, which combine to make a dynamic, and then you repeat this process till you have a bunch of dynamics, and then those dynamics build up the core aesthetics of the game. Finally, you have the finished game, then consumers get it, and then experience that process in reverse. We experience the aesthetics of the game first, and at that first juncture is where we decide whether to keep playing. So wouldn't it make more sense to define our genres on these aesthetics? I certainly think so. But I can hear you now. But what are these aesthetics? To that I respond, oh, you didn't read the paper I linked? And then I'll pretend to be mad. Steven, Flamin, Garbage. Now I'll explain. There are 9 core aesthetics of games. 8 defined by the paper and 1 added by James Portnow, a game development veteran. Number 1, sense pleasure, or game as art exhibition. If you play Mega Man X for the music, or Okami for the art style, you are playing for sense pleasure. Number 2, fantasy, or game as role assumption. You don't typically get to be a rock star or soldier in real life, but you play Rock Band in Call of Duty in order to fulfill those fantasies. Number 3, narrative, or game as story. A lot of RPGs do this, like Mass Effect or the Final Fantasy series. But recently, a lot of indie games like Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons and Journey have been quite narrative-based. Number 4, challenge, or game as obstacle course. This is any game where the main draw is to overcome the arbitrary obstacles placed in front of you. Games like Mario or Dark Souls and Bejeweled all fit this category. Not to be confused with difficulty, which is a dynamic which can be part of challenge. Number 5, fellowship, or game as community. Any game where co-op is super important, if not mandatory. Games like Borderlands, World of Warcraft, Gears of War 3, PlanetSide 2, and any game with super important co-op. Number 6, competition, or game as dominance decider. This is the one added by Mr. Portnow, and contains the obvious Call of Duty, Team Fortress 2, and Battlefield games, but also the games with leaderboards that goad you into trying to beat your friends, like a lot of mobile or Facebook games like that Snake game, or the Super Unicorn Rainbow Attack, or whatever that game is. As well as Pinball FX on Xbox 360 and PC. Number 7, discovery, or game as uncharted territory. This is any game that you go back to time and time again just to see what happens, what will be around the next corner. This is any Elder Scrolls game, or Dark Souls, or Grand Theft Auto, or Dwarf Fortress, or even Zelda for that matter. It is game exploration driven by curiosity. Number 8, expression, or game as reflection of self. Games with this aesthetic allow the player more control over the appearance of the game. Games with skill trees, character customization, and choices all allow players to express themselves through the game. Finally, number 9, abnegation, or game as pastime. Any game you play mindlessly while waiting or winding down. Solitaire, Candy Crush, and Angry Birds all spring to mind, but post-game Grand Theft Auto and Assassin's Creed count as well. Add in grinding in any MMO, or even Pokemon, and you have a more complete picture of what abnegation is. Well, there you have the 9 reasons why we play games. Now what do we do with them? Well, now we group games by their core aesthetics. Luckily, most genres are still usable. Adventure means fantasy discovery games. Horror means fantasy narrative games. Strategy games are challenge expression games, so on and so forth. just some of them are misnamed. First-person shooters, for example, we know what fits into those genres. Call of Duty, Battlefield, and Halo. What do these games have in common? In all of these games, they have you assuming the role of a very powerful individual that fights through huge numbers of enemies in order to push forward a narrative that doesn't really matter most of the time, and there's usually a strong multiplayer element. So these games are fantasy, challenge, competition games. They deliver on 3 core aesthetics. These specific 3 core aesthetics together would make one genre. I don't know what we would call this new genre because I'm terrible at naming things. Look at the name of this show. But first-person shooter is too broad because it would technically include Portal, a challenge narrative game, and Fallout 3, an expression narrative discovery game. You play these games for completely different reasons, yet the first-person shooter label still fits. So I would say this necessitates a change. This MDA system allows us to think more complexly about games and might someday help us rename genres to something less confusing. Still, this reminds me of a discussion I have regularly with Brian from the Yogg video. Does it matter what we call things as long as we understand what they mean? By this argument, even though first-person shooter is too broad, nobody is going to call Portal or Fallout 3 a first-person shooter because she knows that these games don't fit what we have defined first-person shooter as. While I find myself hoping for more exact language, I recognize that this is not strictly necessary. I don't know. Sorry if this wasted your time. Have the cutest picture of a spider ever. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Maxwell Rex, and I'll see you next time.